Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for Neat and Tangled. Thanks for joining me today. Today I have a couple of projects for you. It's actually the same project in two different colorways. But I'm going to show you some ink blending on colored cardstock, and this is a great way to fake an entire ink blended panel. When we finish with this panel, it's going to look like I ink blended the entire thing. But by starting with a darker color, I already have the color base built. So I can just concentrate on making darker and lighter areas, and it makes the process go a whole lot faster. Now, you could start with a white cardstock and blend all of this ink on. You can totally do that. But this is a time saver here, and I like time savers. So I've started out with some navy cardstock and some navy ink, and I'm blending that navy ink darker towards the middle and kind of fading out as I go towards the edges. And once I get a good base of that navy ink towards the middle, then I brought in some unicorn white pigment ink and brought that in from the outside edges and just brought it a little bit into that. And you can see the before and after of that navy cardstock. And as it dries back, it's going to smooth out a little bit. So I did the same thing with the pink cardstock. I used a darker pink ink and then a little bit lighter pink ink to kind of fade that out. And then around the edges, I took the Hero Arts unicorn white pigment ink and brought in a little bit of white ink around the edges just to make the lighter parts lighter. So, and you can do this with any type of blending tool that you like. I'm using the Tim Holtz mini ink blending tool here. You can use some blending brushes or blending sponges, whatever you prefer. And once again, like I said, when these dry back, a lot of that blotchiness is going to kind of go away. So now I have the beautiful new Grateful Heart stamp set from Neat and Tangled. This is new for August 2019. And I'm taking this big floral cluster and I'm stamping it in some Copic friendly black ink onto some Neenah Solar White heavyweight cardstock. And I'm doing a little double stamping here so I can have nice, dark, rich black lines. And before I start Copic coloring, I'm going to heat set this because I'm going to use a ton of colorless blender on this image. And the colorless blender can really make things bleed if they're not dry. So I wanted to make sure that that ink was good and dry before I went in with the colorless blender. And I kind of just scribbled that colorless blender all over these flowers. And then I'm taking my R20 Copic marker and I'm just adding a little bit of this color around where the darkest parts of this flower would be. So towards the inner part of the petals and just where there's kind of marked shading for me. I often like to use those little lines in the stamp that kind of denote shading to help me know where to add my darkest colors. So once I get this kind of added on in all of these dark places, I'm going to go back and I'm going to blend this out with an R000 marker. But I'm not going to take that color all the way out to the edge. I'm just going to kind of blend out that R20 that I've placed down. And then I will go back in with my colorless blender and blend over that entire thing again. This is going to give me a really pale color on these flowers. And by adding the colorless blender first, it's going to give that dark color something to blend into as you're laying it down. So you're not going to be left with the harsher lines that you would if you didn't saturate the image first with the colorless blender. So it kind of just helps it all kind of blend and bleed out. And as I mentioned before, I'm taking the R000 marker and just blending out the R20 and then going back in again with the colorless blender. Now, if I'm having some areas where I really want to add a little more shading, like the darkness got a little too obliterated, I can go back in and just barely touch my R20 marker to that. By doing that, I will increase the contrast and make those shaded areas just a teensy bit darker and really kind of add to that gradient effect. Now, I did the same things with the leaves, only I used G12 and the colorless blender. And now I'm taking the coordinating die from the Grateful Heart stamp set and die cutting this floral image. And I also used that little banner from Barnyard Friends. And I love that banner because it's perfect for sentiments. Just because it's in a Barnyard set doesn't mean you have to use it with the Barnyard set. You can definitely use it on other projects. And that's what I'm doing today. So now that my ink blended panels have dried back, you can see they've smoothed out. I'm going to take the Floral frame stamp set and I am going to heat emboss that onto these card panels. So I've prepped the surface with my powder tool, and then I'm inking the stamp up with some VersaMark ink. And then I stamp that onto the surface, and I will add my gold embossing powder over the top of this, and then I can heat set these. Now I'm going to do it on both the navy and the pink iterations because, like I mentioned before, they're actually the same card. They're just two different colorways, so that you could see a lighter ink blended cardstock panel and a darker ink blended cardstock panel. I just kind of wanted to show you kind of what both look like. So once I've added my embossing powder, I'm going to heat set that. I'm going to heat set both of these, and you can see I have that really cool geometric image that's going to sit behind my die cut florals. And that really adds kind of a modern twist to this card, which I really love, because this is going to feel almost a little rustic, but those geometric frames that are in the floral frame kind of bring a modern element to it. So now I am going to gold heat emboss the thank you sentiment onto these banners, and I have just shaped that clear stamp into the shape that the banner is. It's a straight sentiment normally, but with these clear stamps, you can definitely kind of mold them into the shape that you want on your acrylic block. Then I added my gold embossing powder, and I'm just heat setting those. Now we're going to do even more embossing. I guess I was embossing happy today, but I'm going to show you how to selectively emboss this background stamp here. This is the new Delicate Dot stamp set from the August release, and you can see I've inked up the stamp, and I'm stamping my cardstock onto the stamp. And some of these dots are going to go outside of this frame, but I only want to emboss the dots that are inside of the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and add my embossing powder. You're going to see some of these dots are outside of that frame. That's okay. I'm just going to take a clean, dry paintbrush, and I'm going to brush away the embossing powder that's in the areas that I don't want it to be. And that's another way that you can kind of use your background stamps and kind of partially stamp. You don't have to be perfect with your inking up, and you don't have to mask. You can kind of just stamp it on there, add your embossing powder, and then just sweep away the areas where you don't want it embossed. And so I did that with both the pink and the blue backgrounds, and then I heat set that with my heat tool. Now I am just taking and adding a double layer of foam adhesive to the back of these floral clusters, and I am going to add those onto my card front. And by adding a double layer of foam adhesive, it just gives these a little bit more dimension, helps them to stand up off of that frame, not get lost in there. And I also added a double layer of foam adhesive on the right back side of this thank you banner here. And I added a little bit of tape runner behind the area where it overlaps my floral image. So to finish off these cards, I'm just going to mat these up with a little bit of shiny gold cardstock. And then I am going to add a layer of this real wood paper behind it as well. Now I have to tell you that we are currently designing wedding invitations for my daughter, and these remind me a lot of the wedding invitations. So I think that's maybe where my inspiration came from for these cards, but you can see they have a really cool, modern yet rustic feel. They have those floral images, but the geometric frames really kind of bring in that modern twist. And then of course there is the wood in the background as well, which I think is a unique way to kind of set all of this off. I did finish off these cards with a few of the new glitter enamel dots from Tangled. I just kind of mixed them in with that Delicate Dots background stamp. And here's a look at the completed projects, and you can see how it looks like I ink blended that entire panel, but I actually cheated. As always, you can find links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube, or you can head on over to the Tangled blog. Over there, I'll have more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies for you. As always, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the Tangled YouTube channel so you won't miss any of our paper crafting and card making video tutorials here. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.